Hello, everybody. I am just getting Instagram connected to everything because it always wants to just do something different. But anyway, we're on all the other things. So today we are talking with Byron Ballard, and she is coming out with a new book, and we are going to chat about it today. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy and read it, and of course, as with all her other books, it's just so relatable and so easy to read and understand. And it's just, and I love your writing style, Byron. You make it
Thank
so that it's
you.
so easy, because all of this stuff can be very overwhelming, especially when you have somebody who's new, right? Like, it's just with all the information. Like, I know when I started, the internet wasn't a thing. So I
Right.
was very limited in what I couldn't just get on and Google, this and that. You had to rely on whatever books. Really, for me, it was whatever books were in the library.
Yeah.
And there was
Yeah.
that little section, and they were always checked out. So it was trying to and then I would get them, and then I would write it all down in a notebook because I know I probably wouldn't see this book again for 6 months. So, I think that nowadays, especially with all the information, with just all the misinformation, because, there's a little bit of that too. Your book is just very refreshing, and it really just brings it back to the basics, which we really, really need.
I,
So
I,
why don't go
I
ahead.
think so. I think so. This book is based on a class that I did because I got so annoyed with people who were doing some big elaborate thing when really they didn't know how to ground themselves. They didn't
Mhm.
know how to pull energy, how to harvest energy is what I call it.
Yeah,
Harvest energy to use. They didn't know the basic building blocks of magic. So I
right.
did this class and I called it Simple Practical Magic. And I invited people like me and like you who've been doing this for a long time to
Mhm.
come sit in.
Yeah,
Because no, of course you know how to do all of this. I'm not insinuating that you don't know how. But when you've been doing this stuff for a long time, you realize, oh, I took a shortcut about 10 years ago and it's
right.
been working okay, but now things are a little glitchy. And is it because I need to go back and see what it is I left out when I did that
Yeah,
shortcut? So
yeah,
it really, I invite people in the book to bring in their beginner's mind and go, oh, that's an interesting grounding technique. I've never tried that.
yes,
Or, oh no, I've done that one. Yeah, that one works really well. And to just revel in having building blocks. So it's like the Tinker Toys, it's like the Lincoln Logs, and you just put them together and you do magic. You can
right.
do magic, and it's not complicated. It really is
Right.
not complicated.
Exactly. And I love too that you mentioned about, experienced magical people. That's always one thing that even when I'm talking tarot or teaching tarot, you have people reading for years and years and years, but they don't go back to those basics. They don't just take a regular Rider Waite Smith card or whatever and look at it and think, because they're just so used to, they're in the, doing what they do all the time. So
Right, right.
it's so important to just go back to basics and refresh. And you know what? And I feel like too, what it does is it brings you back to that excited energy that you were in when you started.
Yeah, yeah. And it
'Cause-
gives you that fresh enthusiasm, and you remember why it is you fell in love with it to begin with. And I
right.
think that's really important.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
I did tarot yesterday. I do that once a
mhm.
week when I'm at
Uh-huh.
home. And I had somebody ask me about playing cards. And someone had tied him to a specific playing card, and I really had to get into the Wayback Machine because I started reading with playing cards
Yes.
55 years ago.
Yeah.
But I haven't read with them recently, like in the past
Mhm.
15, 20 years, even to play around with. And so I had to go, hmm, diamonds. Yeah, give me a minute. I need to think about that.
Yes,
Just a minute.
exactly.
Hmm.
I know there's something with that diamond. What is it?
Let's see. Yeah, how's that? Yeah, it was good. It was good. It was good for
Yeah,
me.
no, I love that. I love that too. And that's hi, and now that you even say that, I used to use cards because that's, again, back when I started, there wasn't a ton of tarot cards even around. You couldn't really find them. So and I'm like trying to think the last time I used playing cards. So I guess that's what I'm doing today, Byron.
Oh,
I'm getting
good. It'll be fun.
cards.
You'll like it. Because I came home from the shop and I got out a deck of playing cards and I
Yeah,
just kind of went through them and went, oh, yeah, I remember this. I remember
right.
this. Yeah.
Right.
Because
No,
I started with playing cards and then it was Scholastic Book Fair in middle school. They had a book of tarot and it was the majors
oh
and
my,
it was the little perforated page that you just kept going with and
yes.
then the cards came out and I read with those for ages and ages. I think as I recall it was the Aquarian deck and then
Okay.
it was
Ah.
years, it was several years later that I got a full 78 card deck.
Yeah, that you got. Oh, that's so. I wonder if we could still find that. Like if it's somewhere on eBay. Like I feel
Sure.
like I want to dive into that now.
In the vintage book section.
That would be amazing to find. And how funny is that it was in, the Scholastic Book Fair? Because that was a big freaking deal, that book fair.
Oh my gosh,
That was
yes.
a big deal to us,
And is it still
For
going on? I don't even know. I mean,
yes,
my
they
kid is
they do
old,
still
so
have them. Yeah, no, they do
great.
still have them, but it's really expensive. You like used to be able to go in
Mm,
with like $2 and you can
yeah.
get like 3 or 4 books. They're like full price books now. They're not even like
Oh,
discounted. It's very disappointing because there are kids
yeah.
that can't, and this is coming from me who's a super poor kid. So I'm like looking at it like if I went to this book fair now as poor kid Jen, I wouldn't have been able to get anything.
Right. Right. Me too. No, I was
And that's
terribly
too bad.
poor. And you just saved your nickels and your the occasional dollar. And
Yeah.
then you went to the book fair with like $5 or
No,
$10 and then
big
you could just
money.
buy
Big
everything.
money.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's so true. And, so that part kind of stinks about it. But I love that that's where your first deck came from. Like, that is so, like, iconic. I absolutely love that. So, can you tell, I feel like everyone knows who you are, but could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started? And I know you have a very magical family. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they probably would laugh at you now though, because most of the magical folks have died already. Um, yeah, I
They're up
am.
here laughing at
They're
us.
they're they're ancestors now, and
Yes,
we do our
exactly.
proper. We give them their propers. I was born in Buncombe County, West by God, Buncombe County is how I usually say it. Very rural, very white. Um, I was my family was very poor for a long, long time.
Mhm.
And I was the first person in my family in living memory to graduate high school. I went on to college and from there to graduate school. So I have a Master of Fine Arts in theater, and people who know me say, "Oh yeah, of course it's in theater. We can tell. We can
I
tell."
was reading that in your book and I was like, oh, yes.
That explains everything. It's funny when I go to festivals and they will ask me to do a ritual or to call one of the quarters and people will come up afterwards and they go, "Oh, when you called the north, I really could feel it. I could feel the mountains." And what I wanted to say was what you could feel was a trained Shakespearean actor's voice.
Oh,
So
that's,
I can make you feel about that quarter however I want you to feel about it. And that's just
yeah.
because of my training. I'm glad you got it, but yeah, that's just
Yeah.
having a trained voice that you can hear. So my family are traditional kind of Appalachian Scots Irish folks, and they believe and still believe that there were skills and abilities that got passed down, and they just got passed down. You didn't learn them necessarily from anybody; they
Mhm.
just came.
I
And
love
I was told, I'm gonna quit waving my hands. I was told, I was told
I
when I
talk with my hands too, so totally. You do whatever you need to do.
um, when my daughter was in elementary school, her friends knew that she had one mother who was Scots Irish, and she had one parent that was Scots Irish and one that was Italian. And for a long time, they assumed I was the Italian because of all of this.
I
Anyway, um,
love it.
these are abilities that seem to pass down in my family on the mother line.
Mhm.
And they were things like what we used to call prophetic dreaming, but we now call precognitive dreaming. the
Mm-hmm.
ability to lay hands on and heal, the ability to talk the fire out of a burn, to witch away a wart. It was all those kind of things, and my grandmother's sisters all had different of these abilities. Her one sister that I never met. My grandmother was the youngest of a very large family, so there a lot of those aunts and uncles I only knew when I was really young, and couldn't ask them all the questions I would love to
I
ask
know,
them
right,
now.
right.
But she had one sister who could talk off a wart, and you would go to her, and the whole thing about this Appalachian folk magic is that it comes through a Protestant Christian filter.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't pray to an African god. She didn't recognize the Loa. She didn't pray to saints, none of that.
Mm-hmm.
She believed that she was a vessel for the power of a superior being, a
Right.
stronger being. The spirit could be the Holy Spirit sometimes, but sometimes it was just the Spirit of the Lord.
Right.
And so she would take your hand and imagine that there's a wart here, and she would just hold your hand and she'd talk to you, and she'd say, well, now, Jan, how you doing, baby? Mercy, the color of that hair. Now, is that going to wash out, or are you still going to be like that the whole time? And the whole time she's talking about simple little things she's a rub in the wart. 3 days later, it would fall off.
Oh, wow.
Now, if you think about it logically, there was probably something in the oil of her skin
Mm-hmm.
that interfered with the virus that causes warts.
Right. Yeah.
Probably it was something logical like that, but it was
Right.
seen as this gift from the Lord that
Right.
came through her that she shared. And as a result of that, most of the traditional practitioners of what I do are very humble people because they don't assume that it's a gift they particularly have,
Right.
but the gift is that you are open to the spirit of that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting as a non-Christian because I was raised unchurched. My
Yeah.
mother's family were all Methodists, and my father's family mostly Baptists. So
Okay.
my daddy had a fight with the preacher at some point, and we never went back to church. So I was not raised Christian, never been baptized, any of that, and yet
Mm-hmm.
all these skills and abilities have flowed through into and through me, and then my daughter continues that line.
Oh, awesome. And and I love that too because by knowing that by kind of being the conduit to whatever it is, I feel like it takes the ego out of it too. And like you said, most of those people are very humble because they're not like, oh, it's me. Like I'm so magical, like woo, it's like, no, I could do these things because the spirit is coming through me to help whoever needs it. And that is another big part of just magic across the board is really learning to take that ego and set it aside, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think frankly a lot of our community could do with a little goose like that.
I think so.
To
I think a
just
rather big one, actually. A
to
big,
just
very
remind them.
honking goose.
Yeah.
So the visual just this is where I go in my head sometimes. It's something. Um, and so and I actually I was really intrigued by your story about your mother actually, and how she, I definitely think that she has some gifts, right?
But
She wasn't like didn't seem like she was super on board with it, but just by the way you were talking and your stories about her, I'm just like, oh yeah, she does.
yeah, she had such a weird and hard life. And
Yeah.
one day maybe my job is going to be to write her biography because it was just so strange.
Yeah.
But I think she felt a little bit left out of all of it because then when I came of age and then I got very public about what I did,
Mhm.
she couldn't quite understand why I needed to talk about it. But at that point, I'd gone from doing the traditional cultural folkway piece of magic, and I'd become a fully operational pagan. So
Right.
I added the religious piece into the magical piece, and I
Mhm.
think that they found that a little uncomfortable because they
Right.
had never associated what they did with a religion. I mean, other than being Methodists, because they were Methodists. So there,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Right. No, it is interesting too, just, depending on what what decade even it is, like how that translates into somebody's practice,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and because back then too, they didn't talk about a lot. Like that wasn't the thing. We don't talk
Mm-mm.
about any. Yeah, Aunt Joni can do this, but we're not talking about it. That's
Mm-mm.
it. If we need her, she comes and does her thing and leaves. Like we don't even. That's it. Like it was nothing, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's one of the reasons I rail against the idea of calling what I do Appalachian granny magic, which is what it's a branding technique
it is. Yeah,
that somebody who doesn't know much about it calls
right,
it, because it is for almost all cultures, it's a craft with no name.
right.
You just know within your community who does what. So you
Yeah,
know who to go to if you want to get pregnant. You know who to go to if you're going to have a baby. You know who to go to if grandma is dying. You know who in your community has either the medicinal skill and can tell you what herbs and roots you can use,
right,
or they have that kind of deep spiritual connection, and you
right.
just know it, and they don't have a name. They are not assigned a name.
Right. Yeah, because Appalachian grannies, they're not talking about it, and they're certainly not promoting it online. And if they
No.
are, question them.
Well, yeah, I kind of want to, yeah, to question the authenticity piece, because we're all about authenticity. We talk about that all the time now,
Yes.
and yet we all are drawn to branding. I mean, the whole point of branding is that it catches your eye and then it draws you in. It
Yeah.
really is the ultimate glamour, isn't it?
It
Branding.
is. Yes, glamour
So
magic at
yeah,
its finest, for sure, for
so
sure.
So I
No,
tell
I
people,
love.
yes, it's definitely Appalachian, but it's not just grannies. Because when I
Yes.
was coming up, men were the water witches. They did water witching. They weren't called water
Right.
witches, but they did
That's
witching.
true. Right.
And that
Right.
was considered a man's ability. It's something men did. Now, women could do it, but
Hmm.
so not all grannies, not all old women, and they never would have used the word witch.
Right. Oh no.
That Methodists will occasionally use that.
Hmm.
Baptists never use it. Never.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think you do definitely touch on that in your book as well. And, again, I really think, I just like how you approach it, because we are kind of a society of labels, especially now. Everybody's got a
Yeah.
label, right? And not everybody's ready to have a label. Not everyone's ready to step into those roles. And I think as you're defining it, like if you don't want to call yourself a witch, then don't, you could still do all those things you want to do and practice magic and all that, but you don't necessarily have to call yourself that. But some people do. Like me, I absolutely do. I have a tattooed on my wrist. Like that's what I am. And that's what I do because it's my entire life, right? Like you as well. And I'm
Right.
totally fine
Right.
with claiming that. But there are a lot of people that who've even asked me, like, you like tell people that, like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that, and I'm okay to answer questions as long as they're respectful.
Yeah.
And because that's definitely a big thing, but there are plenty of people that I've been around, talked to, that definitely are very witchy, but they don't feel the need to claim themselves as that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Absolutely. The word witch is a hard one. It really is. It carries such a load of mythological stuff. It carries a load of cultural stuff. I can remember when I was first writing, doing public writing and essays and letters to the editor, I said, we're so popular in October, we're even the decorations.
Right.
And so we have that image of the green faced, wart encrusted ancient woman with the pointy hat and the ragged clothes. And that is a beloved icon for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Little scary, but not totally scary.
Right.
So we kind of love her. And then there's people like us, and we really are way scarier than that icon
That
is.
is so true. That's like the truest thing I've ever heard.
Well, because when witchcraft was becoming a religion in the 50s, 40s, 50s, whenever that started to get all
Yeah.
congealed, there was an effort. I believe there was an effort to make us look like a real religion, but also an effort to make us look not dangerous.
Yeah.
And part of that was for safety. Because yes, a lot of people online are like, oh yeah, I'm a big old witch. I'm a big old honking witch. And on TikTok, they're all blah, 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 blah,
Oh
blah.
yeah, please.
But there's still plenty of places in this country where it's dangerous to use that word,
Yes.
where you will be reviled, where your kids can be taken away from you,
Mhm.
you can lose your job, your marriage can dissolve,
Right.
and you can be physically attacked and your house burned to the ground. So a lot of us are old enough to remember when we did that reclamation thing in the 60s and 70s, and we said a witch is an herbalist and a midwife and maybe we're going to say magic, but maybe we're not.
Right.
And what's happened in the last 20 years is that we have claimed all of that.
Mhm.
We have claimed the green faced witch, we have claimed the herbalist, we've claimed the midwife. And in addition to that, we have laid claim to and are proud to talk about our prowess as magic workers.
Right.
And that can be really scary for people who don't understand, but it should be more scary for the people who do understand.
Right. Absolutely. Because it's just at this point, stepping into the power of that word, even and
Yeah.
using that for our benefit because it's been used against us for so long. So it's like
Yeah.
flipping that script, and like, nope, okay, I'm taking this now and I'm going to use it. So everybody
Yeah.
keep your eye out.
And I'm really clear about, because right now witchery and witchcraft and witchiness and blah 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 is really
It is.
popular. I mean, I think it's beginning to wane a little bit in social media, to be honest. But right now, it's still really
Right.
popular. Someone asked me, "So how do you define it?" And what they wanted to do was trap me into doing a narrow definition of what the practice of witchcraft is.
Mhm.
But I do have a narrow definition. If you call yourself a witch, you better be practicing witchcraft. Period.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So if you don't practice witchcraft, if you only read books about it, or you wear a certain kind of clothing, and I always laugh about bone necklaces, and you have multiple piercings and whatever,
Right.
and you call yourself a witch, but you don't do witchcraft, then you're not a witch.
Right. You're just like you're
Period.
into witch
Period.
aesthetic. That's what you're in.
Right. Right.
Like that's and that is two very separate things. Very separate things.
Absolutely, it is.
For sure. So as, just even going into now the practicing of witchcraft, you include, like I said, the very, very important basics of doing witchcraft and practicing every day. You have a whole chapter dedicated on how to work your practice into your everyday. And I think that's so important. And it's also too people that they think again they're looking at what's online, what's on TikTok and all that, and these big elaborate rituals and all of these altars that are like huge and like candles every and it's like, yeah, they're gorgeous, and if we can do huge big rituals, we will. And sometimes if it's something really important, but every day it's sometimes not feasible. So can you just talk a little bit about incorporating witchcraft practice into your everyday?
Yeah. Once you start really, really embracing your own witchcraft and practicing witchcraft, it is logical you just use it every day. So you're going downtown. I live in a big tourist town. So going downtown and getting parking can be tricky. So you better have a spell that will work for that.
Yep.
And we used to say you must have a daily spiritual practice. That's the way, and most people just can't do that because our lives are complicated.
Yeah.
But if you can wrap your head around the fact that you live in an enchanted world and you're part of that enchantment, then every intention you put out, it should mean something for you. And don't save it for a rainy day. Don't wait until the sky is falling
Right.
and life has collapsed around you to go, oh, I maybe should have done something different. Just use it all the time. You can't use it up.
Right.
I've never known anybody who's used up their quota of magic.
Yes. No, that is
Just keep practicing
right.
it. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it.
Yes.
And that's really the key, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You just keep practicing. And when that thing you thought was going to work so well and it just flopped, then you go,
Then
what didn't I do? Or what did I do? And then you try it again. You kind of use the scientific method, really, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you do trial and error because we are This practice is experiential.
Mm-hmm.
You have to try it.
Right.
And as much as I want people to buy the books, I want them to buy your books and my books and all of the really, really good books. If you only read books, you'll never, ever know
Yeah.
how to do it.
It's so
You have
important.
to just take the leap.
Right.
You got to be like the fool in tarot and you got to step off.
Yeah, take it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was talking with somebody, she knew actually I was going to interview you today, and she's like, "Oh, I just love her books. I read her, I was listening to her audiobook, and so we were talking about, I was talking about you. That's what was happening." Oh, good.
Oh, Jen,
Yes.
thanks.
But, and one thing that I did say to her, that is one thing that I'm so drawn to you, is that you use practical magic. It's everyday stuff that can be incorporated to everything, because there's a lot, and there are people who are very scholarly, which, and they're really into the deep dive study of all those things. And, I've actually been accused of not being scholarly enough. And,
Me too.
yeah. And for me, though, but I'm more about the practical. I want to just talk to the everyday people. And you know what? You got this going on here. Try this, try this. Why do you do this? Like you said, it's all trial and error. And that's like kind of the fun of it, is seeing what works, seeing what
It
doesn't.
is.
Because sometimes when something flops really bad, but then you have a realization of something else. Like, you never know until you try it and screw it up royally. You don't. And I love just the practicality of it. And that, again, is really in your book. What makes it so doable? And like, just incorporate it and doing it every day, like you said. And one thing I always will tell people, like if I'm teaching or something, is most people have some sort of hot beverage in the morning, coffee, tea, whatever it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
just even stirring your intention into that, as you're going to stir it anyway. And it's exactly like what you were saying, like doing it with intention, being mindful of your thoughts, of your movements, the whys and the hows and all of that, instead of just kind of going through life like la la la, waiting to get the next task done, right?
Right.
Like, that to-do list isn't going to ever end, and it's not going anywhere. So hyper
No.
focusing on it is, we might as well have some fun while we're trying to get it done, right?
Oh gosh, if it's not fun, what is the point?
Exactly. No, it's so true. It's
It
so
should
true.
make our lives easier. Magic
Right.
should make our lives easier, not more complicated and hard.
Yes, yes. And and just like you were saying too about, a lot out there is like, you have to have the spiritual practice, and it's like 2 hours long, and we're journaling and
Yeah.
we're meditating, we're chanting, we're doing all these things. I honestly, I don't know that I could, even if I wanted to, I don't think I could do that. Like, I couldn't do that
Right.
much time. But at night before I go to bed, I could be thankful for what happened in my day. And I do a lot of dream work, so I can kind of set an intention on maybe some messages I want in my dreams, or reach out to a deity that I want to have contact with, or even light a candle and speak what I need, speak what I want, and do that. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be the color candle that it's supposed to be. Whatever freaking candle I have, that's the one you get.
And yes, there are times when I get the right association candle and I check the
Yeah,
moon and I see what Mercury is doing and all of those things that I do know how to do.
right. And when we
But you
can,
don't
we do it.
sometimes you need that, but a lot of times you simply don't.
Yeah. Right.
And we used to say, because also obviously I'm a priestess, I'm a clergy person, and we would say, oh, a regular daily practice is really important. But a lot of times for people in their heads, that became this big mammoth task. And I
Mm-hmm.
started telling students and also parishioners, I guess, I'm the senior priestess at Mother Grove Goddess Temple. So people ask me how to do things, and I say, look, we used to say a daily practice, and a daily
Mm-hmm.
practice is optimum. And if you can incorporate it in exactly the way you were just talking about, perfect, it can be done. But you know who can do a daily, deep spiritual practice? The Dalai Lama, the
Yeah.
Pope, people like that. And you know what else
Right.
those people don't do? They don't make supper, they don't wash the dishes, they don't do the laundry, they don't take their kids to school.
No,
They have
no.
servants who take care of all of
Yeah,
that
they don't even
quote unquote
drive.
mundane. They don't
Right.
drive. They don't have to deal with
dry.
that. Yeah.
I mean, and it is so true. And when we can, I think, kind of make time to make something a little more ceremonial, or like you said, get a special candle and see what the moon faces and work with that. It makes it more special because like, oh, I have the time to do this, so I'm going to make it the best it can be.
Yes.
And I think that also helps to kind of make it, the days where you don't always have a ton of time to practice, it makes that okay, because you're like, when I can, when it's supposed to happen, and when you need to really be very specific in your intention and in your spell work or magical work or whatever, it usually opens up for you and it happens. And that's like
Yeah.
one thing I'm just like, okay, so I had all these things going on, but now I have this whole extra 20 minutes, and I have something on my mind that I need to take care of. So, okay, well, guess the universe is kind of pushing me in that direction too, so it's that mindfulness like you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly so. And
Right.
to wrap magic around and through all of your world. It's
Right.
why I encourage people to throw the word mundane out of their vocabulary. Nothing is mundane.
Right.
Everything is sacred. We used to say years ago when you were coming up, and certainly when I was coming up, we got together and we honored the four directions and we raised sacred space. We made a sacred space. Well, we
Yeah.
didn't. It was already sacred. The entire world is sacred. We
Yeah.
create, when we make a circle, we create an intentional space, a working space.
Mm-hmm.
But it's already holy. It's already. So, what we do sometimes is we pull ourselves out of magic because we don't actually believe it.
Yeah.
We want to believe it. We desperately want to
Mm-hmm.
believe it. But we
Yes.
don't actually think that our intentions and our moving energy around really does anything. So if you're
Right.
practicing it, you'll know. If you always find parking, or if you don't find parking because you didn't do your usual parking spell,
Right.
or if you're with two buddies and you're going to go down and have a beer downtown and you all three forget the parking spell, and then you go, oh man, parking spell. And then all three of you do it and you go around the block and then three spaces open up, then you start to get some faith in the efficacy of magic because
Right.
it really does work. But
Yes.
here's my caveat for that
Mm-hmm.
is that anyone who tells you their magic never fails either doesn't do a lot of magic or they're lying. Because
Right.
sometimes it fails, and it fails because you didn't do what you needed to do. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it fails because that was not your job to do.
Right.
And I used the Trump as an example. So there were a lot of people trying to get rid of Trump. There were a lot of people trying to modify what he was doing, trying to bind him
Mm-hmm.
up, and to all intents and purposes, none of that actually worked.
Right.
And that may be because as a nation, as an empire, we have to face this. It can't but just be a matter of magic workers covering it up, because then 10 years later we might get a worse version. So we have to
Yeah.
deal with it. We
Right.
all have to deal with it, not just a handful of really good magicians.
Right, right. And I think too, it's just kind of looking at the situation as a whole, not just what you want to get out of it and what you think's going to happen. It's kind of like bigger scheme than that. It's
Yeah.
not like this narrow thing, and really kind of trusting yourself. And I think too, by doing the magic every day, you're trusting yourself. You're learning to trust yourself. You're
Mhm.
working that intuition muscle, and as when there's new practitioners coming up, like that's so important. And when you talk about this in your book too, about taking time. Don't rush it, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't rush your practice. Just like if you want to learn tarot or any sort of any other divination, you're not going to know it in a week. I don't care what
Oh,
those courses tell you, that you're going to, you'll know tarot in a week, done. And it's like, there's just no way, because just your experiences for reading for yourself, reading for others, using it in different ways, that's how you learn it. That's how you remember it. It isn't just this, little blurb on in a little book that's going to tell you what to do. So, but a lot of people, and it's that's just something too, I think is so important, especially now, like we're, again, society is just, we're like goldfish. It's like the 15-second span, it's gone.
Mhm.
And when you're doing this work, it's the consistency of it that's really helps you be successful. For sure, for sure. And you also talk about another chapter on grounding, which is very, very important. And I think there's a lot of confusion about exactly what grounding is and what it does for you. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
I I find grounding really easy, and I don't know if it's because I'm a gardener and a farmer and I grew up in the country and all of that, but grounding has always been when things got crazy, I just knew what to do. And it's so fun at festivals when I'll say, okay, we're going to practice some grounding. And you see the people that do it, and their whole bodies kind of shift, and they're like, yes, and now what would we do? But there are plenty of people who will tell me, "Oh no, I can't. I'm just too ADHD. I'm just too flighty. I'm just too whatever." And I tell them, if you cannot ground, doing magic is going to be so hard for you.
Yeah.
So do whatever you have to do to get grounded. Here's what I believe grounding is, and I talk about it in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I think grounding is when you wrap around the double helix of your DNA, you put body and soul together, and they are braided as one. And I think that's what grounding really is. And I give a lot of ways to ground in the book because some people, I learned that thing probably in the 70s of tiny roots grow out of your feet and they go into
Yeah.
the ground. And then you're like an oak tree with a giant taproot. And that
Right.
works for an awful lot of people, which is why it's
It
so
does.
popular. But
Right.
some people don't get that. They don't like it. So there's a section in the book about grounding to water. So that if
Mm-hmm.
you are standing on the beach and the water is moving in and out, you ground yourself in relation to the movement of that water. So there's
Right.
lots of different things you can try. But if you cannot ground yourself solidly, the practice of magic is going to be more difficult than it needs to be.
Right. Right. And I think too, it's also you won't have the focus that you need, right? To
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah,
what you
absolutely.
need to do. And I do feel like that is kind of one of the basics that people sometimes assume other people know right away, and they know what it is, they know how to do it.
Yeah,
It's like, oh yeah, it's easy. And it isn't easy for some people, because some people too, they can't, especially during, like, with a visualization, like you said, with the tree root and all that, which I've heard, we've heard so many versions at this point. Some people can't imagine things like that. Like,
no,
it's
they
like
can't.
it's a thing, it's called something, and I can't remember the name. They actually have like a term for it, but they can't do that. So, like you said, like maybe doing the water, because that's something they're physically looking at, and then it's coming up. That might be because they don't have to try to imagine it, because they may not be able to see pictures in their
Yes,
head. And that's
exactly.
like such a great way to do it. And you give so many different ways to ground, and like you said, with anything, try them all. Some work, some
Yeah,
don't. But if you don't try it, you won't know, right?
exactly. And it's such an important protocol for basic magic
Right.
that it's worth it. Whatever you can read about it, anything you can try, all of it, and find the thing that works for you. And spend time doing that. Don't go, well, first I'm going to learn how to craft a perfect 9-foot circle and get the right candles and incense so I can summon a demon.
Right.
Well, trust me, baby, you summon a demon and you don't know how to ground your ass,
Yeah, you're
you're in
gone.
a world of trouble.
Oh my
You
gosh.
could, so do the basics, and the rest, I promise you, will just seem easy.
Yeah.
It will seem so easy.
No, I think that is probably like the most important piece of information for anyone that's new, and for people who've been doing it forever, because it's like,
Yeah,
you know what? It's time for you to stop all of your advanced whatever and go ground your ass and get back with it. All right.
how's your shielding? Do you know how to shield? Do you know how to ward your property? No, but you can summon a djinn.
Yeah. Good
Wow, well, that's
idea.
really good. It's not very practical, but
Right,
okay.
yeah, you have a good time with that. And I
Yeah,
actually, I do a lot of house stuff. I'm very big on doing it, so I love that. I love all your stories on the different, cleansings and wardings of the houses that you've done, because that's something that I do a lot of myself. And just I think, for people that are new to all of this as well, you kind of say, this is what I do and this is what, and I think it's important because a lot of people are watching the shows and seeing, ghost hunters and all of these things, and they think that's how it goes. And,
Right.
in my experience, I've never had it happen that way.
No. And I really do try whenever I'm teaching to say, this is my experience.
Yeah.
This is how I do it. This is what works for me, but it's just a template.
Right.
So for me, the foundational practice is important. It's primary.
Yes.
And after that, you can go pick whoever's spell book off the shelf and it will work for you. But if you don't know any of the basic building blocks of magical practice and you do 4 rhymed couplets, you're just shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And then you'll wind up being disappointed and you won't, have that confidence to move forward. So I definitely think, it does. It all ties in together. And to go back to the shielding part, it was funny because this weekend I have a niece she's very, very empathic, and she's 17. She doesn't she's not into any of this, but I'll go near her, and she lives a couple hours away, so I don't see her a lot, but I go near her and oh my God, this girl's wide open. And I'm like, honey, how is your anxiety? Because I'm going to tell you right now, if I was that wide open, I would. And she's like, it's so bad. It's so bad. Like, so, we were it was actually my brother-in-law's birthday party. So we were there, and I kind of took her aside and I was teaching her how to shield, like the very basic bubble around coming from your heart bubble. It's just very, and of course, how when you do stuff for people, you kind of tweak it to their style, so that they can kind of get it. So, for her, it was a pink bubble because I knew that's what she would, be able to imagine. But, and I just said that to her. I was like, you need, if you start feeling that way, I said, before you go anywhere, and really one of the first places I really learned to shield long time ago is when I would go to Walmart, because that place is like the pits. And if you are not shielded and grounded before you go in that place, forget it, you're a goner.
Well, I describe myself as a high functioning introvert.
Right.
And I'm a Pisces sun and double Scorpio. So I learned really early on that if I was going to survive, because I didn't know it, of course, at the time, because I just knew Pisces is mystic and intuitive and creative and artistic and blah, 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 all that stuff Pisces actually is.
Yes, no, it's it.
And then there would be my, my soft, sweet Pisces heart. And somebody would come along and hurt my feelings and stomp on my heart. Then I've got Scorpio ascending, Scorpio moon. It would be like velociraptors on either side who would come out to say, someone has hurt us and now they must be destroyed. Right. So learning shielding so that my little Pisces heart was protected really helped and leashed up the Scorpio a little bit.
Right.
So it was good.
No,
but yeah, again, for me, grounding is the basis of the foundation. But if you don't know how to shield yourself, you are into a world of hurt.
Right. And it's just, and you come across people, even like if they come for readings or energy work, and we know right away when we get near them what's going on, but you can't, can't always just go blurting it out, or they'll just get scared and run away. But like I said, even with her, like you could just feel the anxiety. And she even said, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that. And she's like, I go to parties and I got to get out of there. It's just too much, and I'm like, well, she's like, maybe I'll be able to stay now. And I'm just like,
oh, yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, no, try it. And I said to her, practice when you lay down and go to bed at night, practice that, imagine that, work on that, make it strong, that little. So, and I said, the more you do it, just like what we were talking about, the easier it is,
Absolutely.
because especially if you are doing any sort of shielding, at first it does kind of take a minute, because you're so kind of, you're like a toddler, you're like kind of wobbling around. But like now, I go into social situations, and I'm sure with you, it's just like, boom, done. Like you just think about it, it's done. Right. And, I know you even talk about that in the book too, as, you use all, you can use all these magical tools you can, and some of them are just freaking cool to have. Like there's something pieces that are just beautiful, and you're like, I just need this. I probably won't use it. It's gonna sit in my altar and look pretty, but you need it, and that's okay. We're human. We're allowed to do that. But when it
Absolutely.
comes down to it, we are the magic. We are, we're just using these things to enhance it. And sometimes people do need visuals. Again, that's just like depending on their learning style and stuff. So I love that you mentioned that too, because I've just come across a lot of people that they want to start again. And it's either the big spiritual practice for 3 hours during the day, or they want to do a spell and they don't have all the herbs and candles and oils that they need. And then it's like, okay, I can't do anything then. I
Right.
can't do it.
Right.
Right. And it just stops them completely. And so I love that you also mentioned that, because that's a big deal. Because I mean, that definitely, like, even when you were talking about before, like they think about it and it's like this big in their head, and they kind of just talk themselves out of it because they're like, I don't have all this stuff,
Right. It
and
gets overwhelming. I mean, there's something exciting, I guess, about making a checklist and going to your local metaphysical store and
yeah,
laying down your credit card and whatever. There's something kind of sweet about that. And there's something about setting the intention. And I'm going to do this work that I've decided on. And here I'm gathering in all my tools. But if you can do that work without any of those tools, then that frees you up either to do more work or just to not work.
right,
Just enjoy living on a beautiful
just do it.
planet in a family that you love and just
Mm-hmm.
doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always tell people I encourage them to set their shields with a couple of Kegel squeezes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And because every woman on the planet who knows about Kegels, I say the word Kegel and they squeeze 3 times.
No, it's
But
absolutely like
our
it's so
pelvic floors are important too, and
right.
it
And
doesn't hurt.
I mean, and if you think it's that root chakra, right? It's the base.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it is so important. And I'm actually a GYN nurse. So for me,
Oh,
that is always something I am always telling people to do. So I did see that in there and I was like,
it
yes.
is. Well, and I didn't know. I mean, for women, because I've had a child, so I learned a lot about Kegels.
Right.
And I used to apologize to the men and say I don't know what the equivalent is for men. And then a good friend of mine said it's the same muscle that stops the flow of urine, so that
Right.
I could tell them. But I remember early on saying about Kegels, and I was with a couple, and he said, I want to ask you, so this Kegel thing, what is that? And she got the wickedest look on her face, and she said, I'll show you later. And and I saw them the next day because we were at a conference together. I saw
Right.
them the next day, and he had a big grin on his face, and he said, "I like Kegels. I
Yeah.
like Kegels a lot."
That is so fantastic. Now he knows. See,
Now he
questions are
knows.
good. Questions are good. Even if they're uncomfortable questions, it's worth asking, right? Absolutely. Because now he benefited from that. I love it. That is so great. I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for coming on with me today. It's always wonderful to talk to you. And I am
You too.
waiting the day to see you in person. Hopefully, I'll get to one of these festivals, and Starwood is on my radar next year for sure.
Good. I hope
Yes.
next year I'm going to be in Cornwall leading a tour for Ren Adventure, so
Wow.
I may not see you there next year.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I'll just have to find something else. It's fine.
We will figure it out. We will.
Yes.
And
And we'll
I want to let your readers, readers too. I want to let people know that if they order my book, which is available for pre-order now at my local indie bookstore, which is malaprops.com, that I will sign it for them because it's right downtown.
cool.
And I'll just go downtown, sign their book, and they'll ship it off to them.
Yeah. Is it? How do you spell that?
MALA PROPS. I think it's .com.
Okay.
There may be bookstore, cafe, but if they put in malaprops in a search engine, they'll get it.
There. Yeah. I'm gonna just add it on here, just so even if they just take it and throw it in the Google, then they can check that out for sure. Yeah. And can you just tell everyone where else to find you?
You can find me soon. We're revamping my whole website. So soon you can find me at
Ooh.
www.myvillagewitch.com. I'm on Facebook as Byron Ballard and also as H. Byron Ballard, Bon Vivant, Witch About Town, something like that. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram. I'm
Awesome.
not on Threads. I'm barely on Twitter. I have enough social media. Thanks.
Right. It is. It's a lot. It's
It's a
just
lot.
it's a lot. And it's very time consuming.
Yes, it is.
Very time consuming. So that's definitely a thing. But and if they just Google you, I'm sure something will pop up.
Yeah, they'll find me. There's
Yes.
also a really handsome African American baseball player named Byron Ballard. I'm not him.
Okay, good to
I don't
know. Good
know
to know.
baseball.
Let's
Yeah.
clear that confusion right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Too bad you couldn't get his paycheck, but we
I
can
know.
get
I'd love to
yeah.
meet him though. I'd love to have a
Yeah, that's
photo
super
with
cool. That
the
would
other
be
Byron Ballard and
yeah.
Dolly Parton. So anybody who knows Dolly, I really want a photo with Dolly. So
Yeah, sign me up for that too.
yep,
Because
yep, yep. That's what we need.
freaking awesome. So yeah, that needs to happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
But
thank you
yes,
so much.
yes, thank you everybody. Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to link all of Byron's stuff too in the post when I
Thank
repost
you.
this. And also when you do get the book, or if you have any of her other books, make sure you review them. Takes just a couple of minutes and it means so much to authors. It helps publishers. And it seems like it's just such a silly thing, but it's literally helps so much for us. So please take a minute and go ahead and review. And if you have like today, if you have any of Byron's books, go ahead and throw a review up there
Oh,
and
thanks.
go ahead
Yeah.
and pre-order Small Magics. And that's available, if you want to go to Malaprops and she'll sign it for you. Yes, I love the cover. It's so pretty.
Isn't it pretty?
Yeah, and definitely you can get on llewellyn.com, all those things. But if you want to sign one, go to malaprops.com. All right, guys, have a great day.
Thank
And
you all.